Welcome to the LFC Transfer Room. I'm Jack, here today to talk about Roberto Firmino and the future of the number 9 spot at Liverpool Football Club. It's one that has a lot of contention. It might be one of the most sought-after positions of replacement for Jurgen Klopp or for upgrade, depending on how you view the future of Roberto Firmino. I'm going to look at some stats, some replacements, and overall some analysis of that number 9 striker position for Liverpool in a short video here today. Before we dive into it, make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Join us here at the LFC Transfer Room. Now, let's get into it. So I sent this around 2 articles from The Athletic coming out in mid-February from James Pearce and towards the end of February from Tom Worville. 2 articles that focus on that number 9 position for this Liverpool Football Club. Starting off with that James Pearce article talking about Roberto Firmino and his dips in form that he's had in very recent years as well. He notes that he's played 279 games for Liverpool across 5.5 years, international commitments on top of that. That is a lot of miles, and the biggest indicator of the decrease in performance is his inability to perform close to his expected goals. This is a chart of where he's performed 17-18, his last great year, 27 goals in all competitions, 15 of them in the Premier League, overperforming his XG by a very significant margin, and he hasn't gotten anywhere close to his XG since then, crawling to getting now close to having almost half scoring what he should be scoring in terms of expected goals. And it frustrates Liverpool fans. When you don't have a forward, the forwards aren't clicking as well. When Salah isn't scoring, Mane isn't scoring, having a number 9 who isn't as clinical as other number 9s in Europe can be very frustrating. The big debate for Jurgen Klopp is, are you replacing Firmino or are you adding competition? Are you keeping him? Are you dropping him to a 10, to an 8? Those are questions for Jurgen Klopp to answer. A far better footballing mind than I am. I'm going to look at some potential alternatives that Liverpool could add either as a replacement for Firmino leaves in the summer or to try and compete for the spot with him and maybe get him somewhere else in the squad. Jumping out to a Tom Worville article for The Athletic. He wrote this in late February, looking at 6 targets. I want to look at those 6 targets as well, kind of in a video form. Use the stats that they use from Smarter Scout to kind of get a good gauge of how good these players are in terms of the various attributes you really want in a Jurgen Klopp player. I'm going to contradict myself. I said the finances are a problem, and I'm going to mention one of the hottest strikers, a potential generational striker for a decade, Erling Haaland. A lot of rumors ahead of his 2022 release clause of 75 million euros. Will he leave in this summer for a larger fee? Dortmund reportedly want double that, 150 million euros. That's a pricey transfer. It would require a hefty fee for Liverpool to get him this summer. But how does he compare to Roberto Firmino? Well, Haaland is a traditional number 9. He's a striker that can play for the next decade. You look at his ability to get the ball in the box, shoot the ball in the box, and have a good presence in terms of his ability in the box. He's a goal-scoring machine. He's one of the top 10 fastest players in the Bundesliga, and overall, he's one of the hottest prospects in Europe with his exploits in the Champions League. Now, where does he fall short in Firmino? This is where Firmino has a unique ability, his defensive contributions and his ability to link up play. Haaland can't match that. Again, he's 10 years younger than Firmino is, so a lot of potential for him to grow into that game, or potential for Liverpool to change up their strategy. Could using Haaland potentially change how Liverpool play, make less reliance on Mane and Salah, and give them a more diverse and interesting attack? That's an interesting question for Liverpool to answer. Of course, Haaland is a well-known name in almost every household in all of Europe. He'd be a great signing for the long term. Realistic? I have no idea. Genuinely no idea how serious this transfer is. Would it be the perfect transfer? Probably. He would be phenomenal, and you could drop Firmino as a 10. He could rotate with Haaland, and it allows you to have a different set of options, as well as a guy who can operate for you for a decade plus as your new number 9 for the long term. So that's a well-known guy. Let's look at a less well-known guy in the Bundesliga. That's Andre Silva, 25-year-old striker, Portuguese striker for Eintracht Frankfurt. He's 3rd in non-penalty goals behind Robert Lewandowski and Erling Haaland, 2 players we've already mentioned. He's very similar to Oli Watkins in the Premier League in terms of play style. But let's look at how he compares to Firmino again in terms of this little radar pizza chart. So Silva's an interesting bridge between the false 9s we'll talk about later and the pure out-and-out strikers like Erling Haaland is. He is similar to Haaland in that he's a bit better in the XGs and the shots, receptions in the opposition box, a bit better aerial duels than Firmino and Haaland are, and his defending impact and link-up play similarly is lacking in comparison to Roberto Firmino. So he, again, would be a different option. Silva at 25 is definitely one that is under the radar for Liverpool, not linked too heavily. He definitely makes sense a lot in terms of being a cheaper alternative to Haaland, and probably the way I would view him as a replacement to Divock Origi, the guy I haven't mentioned yet, is likely going to leave in the summer. I would definitely accept Silva as a replacement for Origi. If he's comfortable playing as a third, second choice striker, being a substitute can be an impact off the bench, he could make the kind of impact. And at 25, it's not too unfamiliar. This is around the same age range that Firmino was signed. So could he turn into a Firmino-style player? Who's to say? It'd be a very interesting one, to say the least. Let's look at one more traditional number 9 from the Tom Worville article. That would be Darwin Núñez from Benfica. He signed from Almeria at 20 years old for £22 million, club record signing. The big issue with him, he's like Firmino, he's seriously underperformed his XG. You look at those XG numbers, those are his expected goals, hasn't been burying them. Just 4 goals in Liga NOS in terms of where he's expected to be, plus 10 goals in the XG department. These are his numbers in Europe, where he had 5 goals before they were knocked out by Arsenal in the round of 32. He's again a very interesting mix. He's a much better carrier of the ball. Ability to dribble it is very strong. Good at getting the ball in the box, playing as a traditional number 9. He's young, still very raw. He can retain the ball very well. So he's a very interesting one. Now, would he go relief Benfica immediately after making that move last summer for £22 million? I'm not sure. He'd probably be cost a lot more than Silva because he's younger. He's coming off of a £22 million signing. So a really interesting potential option there, and some nice stats that underlie a relatively underperforming season in terms of the XG. Now, would Liverpool fans accept another guy who underperforms the XG? I'm not sure, but he's an interesting option nonetheless. Now let's switch things up to some more traditional false nines, not traditional. They play like a Roberto Firmino with an ability to drop back a bit more, allow Salah and Mane to play more aggressively, cut inside more, and that way you don't have too many players jostling for the same spaces on the pitch. First guy we'll look at, Amine Giri from Nice, signed from Lyon last summer. The interesting thing with Giri is that he's a bit of a Firmino light. He's very similar in a lot of these regards, slightly under, slightly over in a few stats, but at 21, he's still a very raw prospect. And his ability to be a long-term replacement for Firmino is very interesting, and it'd be a relatively stopgap signing where you would look at him to be a backup, third-choice guy, develop it in the system over the next 6 to 12 months, and then maybe start to make a bit more of an impact. He has shown a lot of bright signs for the French youth teams, but it is a question of, do Liverpool want a guy right now a bit more solidified in comparison to what he currently offers? So let's go to a guy who maybe is a bit more established. Now, this will be a name that will be incredibly familiar for those who played FIFA career mode in the early 2010s. Breel Embolo, a guy who has been a young guy on the stage for a long time. He's 24 years old now, playing for Borussia Mönchengladbach. Plays in a system very similar to Liverpool, where they will defend from the front. They like to play in transition, so his ability to carry the ball is very different than Firmino. He has some pretty good numbers in comparison to the XG and his ability to be in front of net and score some goals. And at 24, he still is making a lot of development in his career, the Swiss international. His ability to actually have quite good defensive intensity will be very positive for Jurgen Klopp, and I think he's one of the more interesting options here. 2 years left on his contract, won't cost too much, and he could be a really good rotational option to play as a false 9 to rotate Firmino out as he gets to be a bit more aging in the next year or two. Last player of the video, Jonathan David, the Canadian from Lille. 9 goals, 29 appearances in Ligue 1 this season. Liverpool were looking at him last summer, decided not to pull the trigger on him, instead opting for Diogo Jota to add to their front ranks. So Liverpool obviously have already liked what they've seen from him, and I think for probably pretty good reason. In terms of his ability to finish in front of net, he's inferior to Firmino. He's still obviously very young. He's a 21-year-old. But he's also very, very similar in some of those other stats. His ability to link up play, retain the ball, recover it, his defensive intensity. He's got some very interesting stats there. And he's a guy that has been really a lot of rumors there. And if you asked me what signing makes the most sense in terms of what I expect to happen, if I had to put some money on it, it'd probably be Jonathan David. Because he's such a Liverpool signing, a guy who's pretty underrated. He just makes sense from a statistical point of view. They love to analyze their players in that perspective. And he makes sense from an age bracket range as well. You could sign a more out and out forward, Mbappe 2021, Haaland 2021, and still have him as a guy who can also kind of come in the next few years to come in behind the front three. As much as we love Mane and Salah, they will come down from their gargantuan peaks at some point. But those are 6 different options Liverpool could look at. 3 traditional number 9s, 3 false 9s. Could be a mixture of both. Maybe signing one of each could really offer Liverpool a diversity of options up front, as it looks like both Origi and Firmino have very shaky futures at the club. But there's a lot of definitely interesting decisions for Jurgen Klopp to make in the next few months. What are your thoughts on the players I mentioned today? If you're fans of these teams, more specifically, you like to watch these kinds of leagues, you know a bit more about them, let us know in the comments. Did I overstate? Did I understate some of their qualities? And get a discussion going. Would you like some of these signings to happen? Is there anybody else that I forgot about that you think would make a lot of sense? If you asked me, my prediction, my guy, I'd probably say Breel Mbolo. That'd be a fascinating one. And not just because I have a great legacy of signing him on my FIFA career modes in the past. Those are 6 signings that Liverpool could potentially look at to either replace or compete with Roberto Firmino as a number 9 at Liverpool Football Club. This has been myself, Jack, for the LFC Transfer Room. Make sure to subscribe. We're going to have a lot of content coming over this international break, going into the return of Premier League football in the last few weeks. Liverpool make the quest for 7 Champions League titles and a repeat in Istanbul. We'll have all the content, all the reaction, and all the analysis as they make that trip. That's all I've got for you today. This has been the LFC Transfer Room, and take care.